So our next two commands are used to modify corners on objects. The first one's called Fillet, and the second one's called Chamfer. The Fillet command will put a round corner on a corner that's normally sharp. So Fillet, if we look at our tools, is in the middle of the modify bar. If you don't see Fillet, it might be because you used Chamfer, and the chamfer is on top. Whichever tool you most recently used is on top. So we'll click on Fillet. And now, this is why it's kind of important to have a command line where you can actually see several lines of text. When Fillet starts, it's asking you several questions. And if you don't have a expanded command line, you're not going to see what it's asking. So let's try that again. I'll click on Fillet. And right now it says select your first object. There are several options for the command, but if we go back a step a little bit, take a look here. It says the current settings for the Fillet command are trim mode is on and the radius is 0. So what does that mean? Radius is 0. That's kind of a weird number. A 0 radius would be no radius, would be a sharp corner, and that's what we've already got. So when AutoCAD starts up, it's going to have radius set to 0. We need to change that, and you'll change that by picking the radius option, and then let's add the radius we want. So here it's saying 1 inch, so how about a radius of 1? And now I'll select the first object, and then I'll select the second object, and we see what happened. The corner got rounded off. The extension where it was square before has now been trimmed back, and it's added an arc with a 1 inch radius. Okay, I can click on Fillet one more time, run the command again. Now it remembers from the last time the radius, so as long as the radius doesn't change, we can keep running Fillet after Fillet. If you take a look though, one of your options here is multiple. Because the Fillet command ends after every use, if you leave it in multiple, you can go around and add Fillet after Fillet after Fillet without having to restart the command. Alright, so fillets, why are objects given round corners? Well, take a look around you. Most objects that are manufactured, you don't want a perfectly sharp corner. Rounded corners, for a lot of reasons, have advantages. They're also more aesthetically pleasing to look at. So adding fillets to manufactured parts is not that odd an idea. Now, on this example, we had 4 lines, and I filleted one line to the other. Those were just lines, though. And this example, I have polylines, right? This rectangle is a polyline. I'll click on Fillet. I see the radius is still set to 1, so I'll go ahead and change it to my new radius of 1.5. And then before I start clicking, see, I could click lines, but I know I'm working with a polyline, so if I pick on polyline, do you see what's going to happen if I click? Yeah, it'll get all of the corners all in one shot. So if you're working on something that needs to have each corner filleted, it's much easier to make it a polyline or create a polyline out of lines and then do 1 fillet instead of 4 or 12 or 25. Alright, that's the Fillet command. Now, the option for a 0 fillet, you might have thought that was kind of stupid, right? Because the whole point is to round the corner off, and 0 round is not round. Well, the radius, if it's set to 0, is actually got some uses. For example, take a look here. I've got one line here, one line there. They overshoot each other. Well, I set my radius to 0, and now if I pick this part and this part, look what happens. See, it cleans up the overlap. And now these 2 lines don't even touch, right? Well, I'll start the Fillet command, and I will give a click, and give a click, and even though they didn't touch, they've now been extended to touch each other and meet at that perfect corner. So having a 0 radius on a fillet is really not as dumb as it might sound. Let's talk about the next command. The next command is Chamfer. Chamfer lives underneath the Fillet command, so we'll pull that up. A chamfer is a beveled corner, so we're going to knock the corner off on an angle instead of on a curve or an arc. So now a couple of things. Take a look. We started the chamfer command, And right now it says it's in trim mode. It also says that the current chamfer distance is 0. And it's actually giving you two distances. It's saying the distance 1 is 0 and the distance 2 is 0. What does that mean? Well, it means chamfer wants to work like this. It's going to come back a certain distance and go down a certain distance 1, and distance 2, and then create a diagonal line based on those two distances. But if the distance is set to 0, you're going to get nothing, right? So how do we need to fix this up? Well, you need to go change the distance. So click on the distance, and now we'll set the distance for the first one to 1. And then the second chamfer distance, we'll set that to 1. And you see how it remembers 1 from just a second ago? So you can just hit enter, since 1 is already in brackets. And now, if I pick that line and that line, we see it creates the chamfer. Right? The original corner was out here, and now we've got 1 inch back and 1 inch down from that old corner. That is a beveled corner made with chamfer. I'll do that again over here. Of course, it remembers what we had it set to last time. And then if you want to do multiple chamfers, just like with Fillet, there is the multiple option, so you don't have to restart the command every time you want to make a chamfer. Okay, so those are some 1 inch chamfers added to the corners of that square. Now, those are lines again, 4 lines. This is a polyline. So let's click on chamfer. We see the distance now is going to go to 1.5. And then the second distance will be 1.5. And if you have a polyline, select the polyline option. And now look what happens as I hover over my polygon, right? Bam. It gets all the corners in one shot, all equally chamfered. Alright, so that is the chamfer command. That would be for adding bevels to geometry, either right angles, acute angles, or obtuse angles. Now, we've talked a lot about lines and polylines, and I see here that I have lines. And, you know, sometimes we're going to say, I wish I had made this out of polylines, and you might want to, you might be tempted to just trace over it using object snaps to recreate geometry on polyline, but you don't have to do that, because we can take line segments like these and then join them together into a single polyline. So now join is not up here on the main tools. We're going to expand the panel, and we see join is in the middle at the bottom. Looks like 2 little arrows pointing toward each other, right? And the idea is we'll take line segments and weld them together. So I'll click on join, and I'll pick this line and that line. You can pick them however you want. Enter. And now when I select, we see this object is a polyline. It has been turned from lines into polylines. Same thing going on here. I have 4 lines. I will join them. Enter. And now we have a single polyline. So if you drew with lines and you need polylines, don't redraw, just join the line segments together. At other times, though, you're going to want to take a polyline and break it. Okay, I don't want a single polygon, I want 5 lines, or I want 4 lines. Well, you can do that. The command is explode, and it's over here underneath the erasing tool. Explode, you know, if you looked at the icon, it looks like a box with the sides blowing out of it. Dumb icon. It used to look like a little stick of dynamite with the fuse lit on the end, which was much more fun. But, of course, no one has a sense of humor. So, explode is kind of a boring looking little tool now. But here's how it works. I'll click on explode, and I will pick a polyline, and I'll hit enter. And it doesn't really look any different. And in fact, you won't see any differences until you start working with the lines, because now these are line segments. They are no longer joined together into that polyline. Okay, so here's a rectangle created with the rectangle command. Hitting explode will just turn it into 4 separate line segments. Okay, so when we want polylines but we have lines, we can join them. When we have polylines and we want lines, we can explode them. These panels for draw and modify, actually all the panels, they have expansion segments underneath. They have another level. If you want to keep that open, there's a little push pin here in the corner. You can click the push pin, and then even when you move away from the panel, those tools stay open. If the push pin is not pushed in though, as you move away, well then the extended panel rolls back up into the ribbon. Here's our last modify tool we're going to talk about. It's very handy. It'll come in, I think, very handy for some of the assignments we're going to do together. It's called align. And align is just a fancy way of saying line up, right? So align is down here in the bottom corner of the expanded modify panel. And here's how it works. We can take an object that is crooked and line it up with something that's straight. Let's say this thing got rotated at some wacky angle. I have no idea what the angle is, but I want to straighten it out. Well, I'll click on align and I'll pick the object, enter. Now I'm in phase 2. Phase 2 is line up some points. So my first source point is here, and I want that to land here for destination. And then my second source point is here, and I want that to line here for destination. Now you can work with 2 points or 3. If you want to do 3, maybe the midpoint to the midpoint. So I'll line that up. You can also just do it with 2 though. 2 is fine. I'll click that. I'll say, hey, the corner there goes to here. Scratch that. I'll say, hey, the corner here goes to here. And the corner here goes to there. And I have no more points, so I'll just hit enter. It'll ask me, do you want to scale the objects? Do you want to make the box as big as the line? But I don't, so I'll just hit enter. No. And check it out. It took the box and lined it up with the line. So when things are crooked and you need to make them straight, you can use a line. You could also take things that are straight and make them crooked. Let's say I have no idea what angle this is, but I want this object lined up with it. So I'll go to align. I'll say this is the object, select, enter. I want that corner to line up here. I want that corner to line up here. I'll hit enter because I don't have any more corners. And do I want to scale it? No. Enter. And now the thing that was straight is now crooked. Okay, so that will wrap us up on our second level of object snaps, drawing tools, and modifying tools for our Unit 11 materials in Industrial Drawing B12. Now we can talk about some assignments.